for coming. I'm going to apologize for it in advance because my dad and Doug pulled a lot of the same material. So if you hear it again, there's a theme.
Your dad sent it over to me ahead of
time. To clear a couple lines with both of them. I wanted to give the perspective of the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren that aren't able to be here. Because we saw a different side of him that others didn't, and so it's kind of themed in that, and just, we called him Papa Moo, and nicknames are funny like that. You have the first grandkid, names him that, and you think about that, and you're saying, he had this personality, and a 2-year-old names him, and it fit and it stuck, and if anybody doesn't know, it came from his uncanny ability to imitate a cow on a farm, and it was amazing. He did it like this, and he was able to move. He was able to moo at 12 great-grandchildren. And that's just spectacular. But every time he did it, he would cup his hands over his mouth, and he would remember back to his days on the farm, and he would moo, and he would laugh, and the kids would laugh, and that connection was so incredible. And like Doug said, my dad said, it was that connection that was so unique. And that name also meant a lot because it came from his humble beginnings, and again, we talked about that, but being an orphan on a farm in Kansas, and it never ended from there. He had humility his entire life. His accomplishments were significant, and you had to pull them out of him. You had to get him to talk about them, and you heard about them years later in the stories that would come out, because he didn't like to brag. He didn't like to talk about things, and like Doug said, he didn't like people that bragged. He would brush off the compliments. We would talk about how amazing it was that he won the Big 8, and he was honored back there in those pictures, and he played golf with Arnold Palmer, and and being an accountant like him, he was pulled on to manage an entire plant, and he wouldn't talk about that. He wouldn't bring it up. He didn't measure his life like that. And he wouldn't. You would compliment him on what an amazing husband he was, what an amazing father he was, and he would brush his. The nickname also meant what it took to be a hard worker, what it took to milk a cow every day and get up early and do his chores for his uncle and his cousins. And that continued. He was the hardest worker in the room. At GM, even in retirement, he was the president of Atlas Valley, the president of the plantation. He was incredibly inspiring to me and two of my siblings in that way. We had such an incredible privilege to be raised in his legacy, and every day I go into work and I think that I'm always going to be the hardest worker in the room, and that came from him. Sorry. And like I said earlier, the nickname also came from his uncanny ability to relate to everybody. Whether you were 2 or you were 92, he could make a connection to you. He would make everyone feel welcomed and valued. There he goes. There he is. Perfect timing. Thank you, Papa Moo.
Yeah, good.
He would meet so many new people in his life, and we brought a lot of people around to meet him. Friends like Saul, friends that are no longer around in our lives, but he just made everybody feel so welcome, so genuine. He would sit down and talk to you and dig into exactly what Doug was talking about. And I have a similar story And I know that everyone in this room has a story exactly like this, but it was amazing. About 10 years ago, I told him about this report that I was working on, and I was sitting there thinking, who can I tell about this? Just this unbelievably boring, mundane accounting report that I was filing with the SEC. And it is literally 700 pages, okay? You can look it up. And I told him about it. I emailed, he was so excited about it. I emailed him about it, sent him a link to it, and he called me about a week later, and he said he spent hours reading it and had all these questions. He had written down all these questions. And I'm literally thinking there's not a human being on earth that looked at this report other than him. Just like, how could you read this report? And he just loved it. And he was so excited. He sent me this very formal email saying, I'd love to talk to you about all these questions I have. I had no idea what you did and all these things. And I know everyone in this room has that story about him where he wanted to know everything you did and what you were passionate about. And that connection just never left you. With Grandma, he had that too. And he had that in so many different ways. I remember playing cards with him on a trip to Montana. And he was always worse than Grandma at cards. He was always get beat by her, but he wanted to play. He wanted to learn. He wanted to, so in his 70s, he learned how to play bridge. And he always talked about how much better she was. And his love and his loyalty for his Miss America. It was so consistent and unwavering for 75 years. As my dad said, and Doug said, we're just so proud of him and your marriage and your connection. And we just want, I think so often about emulating that in my marriage. And it's just such an incredible example of all of us. Papa Moo leaves an incredible example and legacy of humility, inspiration, and like Doug said, joy, just absolute joy. We won't. We'll miss the Sunday. We'll miss the Sunday Skype calls. We'll miss the heartfelt stories that he would tell. And we'll miss the huge bear hugs. Thank you, Papa Moo. We love you very much.